So what I'd like to present here today is some insights on, in terms of what's happening with the economy and GDP, a broad level insight. And being a consulting firm, of course, we have to share tons of numbers and tons of graphs without which it will not, merit a consulting firm. So we would be sharing a lot of numbers on what has happened in 21, in 22, and how do we see 2025 shaping up. We aren't really looking beyond that, but up till 2025. A bit of insights on fashion industry, and then some trends or imperatives which we feel that senior management needs to focus on over the next 12 to 18 months, and that would have a very serious impact on the business. I would also like to use this platform and this time to just announce that both Images and Technopak are coming together to create a new fashion intelligence platform. It's a subscription-based product that we are working on. And, it will have some of these insights and a lot many more across categories, across consumers, across all our retail professionals, fashion professionals, and looking at trends, what are expected to happen over the next 5 to 10 years. You would be hearing soon from us a bit more about it. We would be launching it either in April or May, but would be very happy as that will be the first fashion intelligence platform for the country. I'm just getting my angle right in terms of where I can see the numbers. So in terms of, just a second, yeah. So in terms of the GDP, we did see India degrow slightly in 2021. We were about $2.7 trillion in 2020, which of course because of COVID degrew. But we do think the industry would be back in terms of performance, in terms of GDP. We would see about 10%, 10.2% every year between 2020 and 25. And we would become the 5th largest economy on a nominal basis. Of course, on a PPP basis, the numbers are different. But yes, we would cross UK by 2025 as far as our GDP is concerned. Per capita income would continue to grow, and we think over the next 5 years, it will remain stable at about a growth of 10% every year. And that would be one of the key factors which will influence consumption and which will influence the retail market, and of course have a direct implication on the fashion segment. The market did degrow by about 5% in consumption and earning potential, and that had a direct influence. We see a number of minus 31% in 21 as far as fashion industry's numbers go, and that we'll talk about as we move ahead. So all of us know that the private consumption forms the largest share of GDP in India. So at about 60%, we are amongst the largest private consuming countries in the world. And of that private consumption, about 49% is merchandise retail. Services is slightly higher at about 51%. That would continue to grow. But merchandise at about 49% is half of the private consumption. So this was in 2015, 2020, when the economy was evolving absolutely at a natural pace. And we grew from about $1.6 trillion GDP to about 2.7. But when we look at 2021, when the industry degrew, when the GDP degrew to about 2.6 trillion, the retail consumption of about $800 billion came down by about $50 billion and reached about $750 billion. And this is the first time in many years simply where consumption degrew. But as all our fundamentals are in place, we think consumption will not have an impact, and we would cross $1 trillion by 2025 as direct merchandise consumption. Fashion, of course, forms a very large part of it. And so 1 trillion consumption in terms of our numbers, when we looked at it pre-COVID, we would have reached that in 2022. We are running about 2 years late, so we would be looking at about 20 economy mark, which was expected to be about 24 or 25. That's a direct impact of COVID. And why is it? And one of the key factors that is really helping us in this growth is urbanization. So about 34% of India is urbanized just now, but rapidly growing. And we would see that about 37 to 38% of India, and that roughly translates to about 400 to 500 million people, increasing consumption, and that's one of the key factors that's also influencing. Apart from that, of course, there are many other factors: nuclear families, women joining the workforce, basic consumption levels going up. But urbanization is one of the key drivers that we see in the next few years. And within urban India, what is very interesting is that there is a very, very strong skew in private consumption. So about 25 cities account for 32% consumption of India. And what's really interesting is that Delhi NCR and Greater Mumbai account for easily about 12% of this consumption. These are two very, very large clusters which need to be focused on. The next 6 cities account for the next 11%. And then, the next 10 cities account for 7%. And the next 50 cities account for another 5 or 6%. So when we're talking about 75 cities in India, that accounts for roughly about 40% of consumption. That's a very, very strong skew and really helps companies sort of evaluate business growth, looking at what kind of clusters to, sort of invest in, grow in, and plan the next. So being in 200 cities might not be the right solution, maybe just the right locations and right digital marketing within 75 cities can also give an amazing ROI vis-a-vis being present in 200 cities. Merchandise retail, like we talked about, would cross about $1 trillion. Apparel did come down as a share. So in 2021, apparel and accessories, here we've clubbed them together at about 5.7% in 21 in terms of coming down as a part of the consumption. It would come back to its, so apparel accessories, be it footwear, be it beauty, we would see a very large rate of growth, faster growth than many other segments within retail consumption at about 14%. In that sense, the opportunity remains, and one needs to figure out how to be able to be a part of this growth well. And of course, all of us are aware of this fact, but looking at it in numbers form, that COVID has really given a digital push within the entire market. We always knew that digital would be a very important part of the retail business, but last 2 years have propelled it much faster. Digital at this moment is about 50% of modern retail, which is something that was not expected to happen. In 2021, it became about 67% of modern retail, simply because so many stores were closed. But we think it will level down back to 50% of modern retail, and we'll talk about that a bit more. So that's basically, looking at the entire consumption spectrum. Still promising, fundamentals remain strong. So the consumption story remains strong as far as India is concerned. When we look at the fashion segment, so, earlier, whenever we used to look at fashion, we used to largely focus on clothing. But we think fashion is much more beyond that, simply because the adjacencies are sort of working together now for product segments. So be it clothing, be it footwear, accessories, eyewear, timeware, and wearables, beauty, fragrances, all of it is coming together to form fashion. And that's where we are looking at a spectrum which is much bigger. So clothing still remains naturally the lion's share, but if you see from a opportunity perspective, beauty, we've seen over the last 2 years, has seen unprecedented growth. We think that will continue for some more years. Accessories is again an area where there is limited focus from companies. It's again an opportunity that companies need to look at. And overall, if you see, fashion will increase its market share and its wallet share from about 11% to 14%. So currently it's about 11. We think it'll grow up to about 14 to 15% in 2025. But while yes, of course, these are all sectors that one needs to look at in detail, we've done more work on clothing and accessories, and we're sharing some of those insights. You will be seeing much more of this whenever our fashion intelligence platform is ready. This is truly a snapshot of what we think we'll be able to offer as a part of the fashion intelligence platform. So when we look at a gender mix within fashion, contrary to what happens across the world, menswear is a larger segment in India at this moment, and women's wear is a smaller segment. But women will surely make up for this lost time, and we would see a much faster growth in the women's segment in the next 3 to 4 years. So currently at about 36 to 37%, vis-a-vis 41% of menswear, we think both of them will level out at about 40% as the industry grows over the next few years. When we look at a share of branded versus unbranded, so branded currently is about 45% of the total market. And that's basically a brand and not a label. So branded is about 45%. We think the numbers would reverse by 2025. Branded would become 55% and unbranded would be the smaller share. And that's how the industry would progress over the next few years. A share of Indian and Western wear, while normally, when you look at the Indian market, dominated by the fact that Indian women wear largely Indian clothing, the thought is that maybe the Indian market is larger. But the fact is that it's only about 30% of the total market. 70% is still Western wear. And if you look at it from a breakup, so it's menswear, which is about 93% Western. Of course, ethnic has become a trend in Indian menswear segment as well. But the fact is that ethnic is only about 7%. We don't see that changing dramatically. It's not that we would see men wearing, kurta pajamas to work. That we don't think will change, and that will remain a smaller segment as far as India is concerned. Women's wear is where the equation would change slightly. It's about 29% Western wear and 71% ethnic wear. We think by 2025, Western wear would be about 35 to 36%. So that's the increase that we will see. And of course, the fact that the total market would also increase by then. Kids would remain similar. So overall, if you measure the market, it might not change dramatically, but women's wear is where we'll see the maximum new development. When we look at between traditional and modern, in terms of how do you split the market, so fashion is about 32% modern currently. We think it will become about 50% in another 4 to 5 years. But what's interesting is that within this modern formats, what's the kind of breakup that one is looking at between brick and mortar and e-commerce? So brick and mortar, roughly about 50% of modern retail, and e-commerce about 50% of modern retail. And within the 50%, EBOs, MBOs, and LFS have a share. We think both EBOs and e-commerce would increase the market share in the next few years. That's basically broadly a snapshot of what's happening in the fashion industry. Would be happy to discuss any more numbers or possibilities one would want to look at. Very quickly, I have a 20-minute slot and I have a little time left, about 7 minutes. So I just very quickly wanted to talk about what we think are the key trends and imperatives that senior management and leadership should be focusing on over the next 12 to 18 months when we look at the fashion business. We think technology would be the largest value creator within the business. It's something that everyone knows, but one really needs to understand what is the role technology can play through the entire value chain, be it increasing revenue, be it making it more capital efficient, be it increasing your profitability, or increasing the customer value overall, a single customer that you are speaking to. And what these elements could be. So yes, of course, as Anish also mentioned, it's a digitally active and integrated ecosystem that we are looking at, starting from pre-sales, which could be digital advertising, a bit of ATL, lesser BTL in the coming years. looking at discovery. The consumer could be discovering you anywhere in the omni-channel link, could be in the store, could be on the website, could be through Google, could be through your social media presence, could be through your advertising. So in terms of really an integrated response to the consumer across all the channels, he or she could be purchasing you at multiple, so it could be at the store, it could be again on the website, it could be a direct contact, could be through a marketplace. So really being able to offer that entire omni-channel experience would be key, would also help in increasing the average customer value for each customer, and also making sure that you remain engaged with the consumer in the post-sales environment, be it your bots, be it your conversational AI elements that you would include in that, or traditional support of a call center, but really looking at the entire customer journey from acquiring to making sure that you're maximizing the customer value for each customer. Then looking at experience, and as Anish also mentioned while introducing the event, that experience is going to be key, and it's not just the product, but it's also in terms of what is it that you're communicating, how is it that you're communicating, how are you using technology to enhance the experience. So be it looking at virtual reality, looking at, AR, VR, looking at how do you use magic mirrors, how do you make sure that your consumer buys, the returns are lower, and you're sort of increasing your conversions. One of the smart trial or virtual trial tools that we work with, we've seen a very direct impact of using that on your website. So be it increasing your engagement per 6.6 minutes, or looking at a higher AOV of about 27%, or increase in conversion on the SKUs that the consumer tries virtually, about 50 to 80%, and a decrease in return of about 16%, a direct measurable impact of using a technology tool. Again, then using big data and analytics, be it in personalization, trying to understand your consumer, trying to get to know her as closely as possible, or using analytics and AI to look at locations, identify what could be the right catchment for each of the new stores that you open, or looking at merchandise planning, which is based on that location. There are a number of ways this technology needs to be integrated at all levels. And so that's really looking at from a customer acquisition and increasing your revenue perspective. But there is a direct impact on increasing profitability, as well as really looking at how do you make your whole business more capital efficient? How do you save on your operating expenses? It could be an IoT related product that you can use for energy management in your stores, or it could be investment in technology at manufacturing. So be it lean manufacturing, be it introducing RFID, just making sure that you are investing the right amount of technology that's required. There are many, many multi-billion businesses that are already there in fashion, and many would grow. So when you look at H&M, when you look at Zara at about $19 to $20 billion, there's an amazing amount of technology that's behind the scenes, in their manufacturing, in their supply chain, in collaborative supply chains that they work across, in warehousing, in logistics. And so when we're looking at technology, one really needs to look at it from end to end, from the consumer till back to, if possible, fiber, where you are tracing the fiber for your product. Plus, technology is not just technology. It needs to be integrated as a part of your working. It needs to be the culture within the company now. And technology, that's why one really needs to focus on the talent pool in terms of the language is technology within the company. It's not that you have a separate technology department. It needs to be integrated in each and every activity that a company does. And that's something that's absolutely required for changing the way the business will be done in future. Making sure that you're looking at all the tools that are available, making sure that you are upskilling your people in terms of understanding what needs to be done digitally. An absolute focus on making sure that there's a culture within the organization. And of course, for some of us, technology could also be a part of the product that we are selling. So it could be a wearable that we could be looking at in future, which sort of, it could be a part of your athleisure range or something else where, technology becomes a part of your product as well. Another imperative that we think is absolutely essential as businesses grow, as fashion companies grow in India, is securing your production or sourcing opportunities. Simply because one can't really, the international supply chains can be fickle, can be fragile, can be impacted by geopolitical issues which are not related to you. And the fact that India has limited manufacturing capacities which are absolutely tech forward. That's why it's absolutely essential that securing capacities from a manufacturing perspective, it could be your own investment, it could be an investment into a captive unit, or it could be the Indian subcontinent that one could look at. But this can be a very, very big, a break in growth in case manufacturing capacities are not put into place in the next 12 to 18 months. Value, we think, will continue to grow the business across India, and value is what will create stories. It's not so much as premiumization, but it's value. But we need to understand how do you define value. So, we think it's a high fashion quotient mixed with good quality, experience, and of course pricing, which is relevant for consumers. But when you're looking at value sourcing, the other element that we need to look at from a productivity perspective is also the number of turns that we are doing, the number of inventory turns that we're looking at, because that has a direct impact on profitability. If you see the average inventory days across Indian businesses, they are much higher than what you would find in many international businesses. Zara at about 90, H&M at about 100 odd, 136 average inventory days are sort of benchmarks that one looks at. Some of the research that we've done, we found Indian brands to be ranging between 200 to 800 inventory days, which of course can have a very less than positive impact on your profitability. Very quickly, yes, we are all aware of it, that ESG, traceability, and looking at producer responsibility is something that's imperative for business, and one needs to plan for that in the next 12 to 18 months. We also feel that the increased vibrance in the ecosystem, which has happened, so there is a public listing every month, there's a investment happening every week in either a D2C brand or a premium brand. And that's really changed the entire ecosystem. That's really increased the vibrance around the ecosystem. One, of course, needs to see how that pans out over the next few years, but it will surely give impetus to a lot of creativity, much more D2C business happening, and a lot more entrepreneurship that we think will happen over the next few years. Of course, there will be challenges because there are only a few very large fashion houses who are investing in these brands. So one really needs to see how the market balances out over the next few years. Shipping globally is something that's new for Indian companies over the last 2 to 3 years. It opens up the entire world. Of course, first you ship globally and possibly have a store later on in the international markets, but that's something that one needs to look at. 2020, about 2 billion worth of export was done as D2C shipment internationally, and this market would grow in the next few years. And last but not the least, one needs to explore the metaverse. Initially, when e-commerce had come in, there was a lot of hesitation around it. A lot of brands did feel that, is it really something for me? Today, it accounts for about 50% of 50% of organized sector. So let's not ignore it. It's a new reality, and one needs to see how it pans out over the next 2-3 years. Investing in metaverse is not expensive. Returns could be very high. So it's an opportunity that one should look at, especially somebody speaking to the younger consumer. So just quickly to sum it up, technology would be the biggest value creator. we need to source, secure sourcing and manufacturing. Value would drive. We need to look at inventory days and how are we planning our complete product life management. Increased focus on ESG. Increasing the vibrance has increased, and we would see many more investments happening in the sector. Looking at international markets and exploring the metaverse. Thank you.